Udokanma was the man everyone adored. To them, he was kind, wise, and generous. Whether you are having a wedding, funeral, or communal gathering, Udokanma would always be the first to arrive and the last to leave. He offered his comforting words and lended a helping hand wherever it was needed. For every sorrowful cry, Udokanma was there to console. For every joy, he was there to celebrate. His influence was so powerful that even the king consulted him on matters of importance. Although he was poor, the villagers saw in him an example of humility and service. Unbeknownst to the people, his heart was filled with darkness. Every tragedy, every piece of misfortune that befell the villagers was carefully orchestrated by him. He thrived on the people's dependency and pain and fed his hidden lust for power and control. He believed that every good thing in life should come to him and his family alone. But Udokanma was clever. No one suspected his intentions because he played his role so well. He concealed his envious and greedy nature beneath his happy and contented displays. The village lived under the illusion that he was their guardian angel, unaware that the man they held in such high regard was, in fact, the source of much of their suffering. One morning, Udokanma was alerted to a tragedy in the village. A child from a nearby family had passed away from a mysterious illness that had struck suddenly. When the news of the family's anguish reached Udokanma, he made his way to their home with his sorrowful face to sympathize with them for the loss of their beloved son. As he entered, the grieving family members embraced him. Relieved by his presence, he offered them words of solace and urged them to remain strong and spoke of how the spirits would protect them in the days ahead. To the onlookers, it seemed as though Udokanma was truly affected by the family's pain. Yet, as he stepped away from the grieving family, he began to laugh. The child's death had been no accident. Udokanma had visited a native doctor weeks earlier to cast a spell of illness over the child to punish the family for prospering while his own family struggled. As he returned home that evening, he said to himself, "That's what happens when you grow too bold." Udokanma knew he had to maintain his false front carefully. The villagers needed to see him as a constant comforting presence, not the architect of their misery. So he would continue to play his part, biding his time and waiting for opportunities to strike. At home, Udokanma had 3 children, 2 sons, Nnanna and Ikenna, and a daughter, Ifeoma. His children were raised to believe that the world existed solely for their benefit. They found it difficult to lift a finger at home because their father had a way of making people do the chores for them. His first son, Nnanna, had learned from an early age that his father's public generosity was a game, a tool to gain the village's trust while he pursued his darker goals. He took after his father the most. He was notorious for petty theft, sneaking into villagers' barns at night to steal yams, sneaking goats from grazing pastures, and sleeping away under the cover of the night. But thanks to his father's influence, no one ever suspected him. Udokanma protected Nnanna, turning a blind eye to his thieves and offering him words of praise for bringing in food and supplies by any means necessary. Ifeoma, Udokanma's daughter, was reserved but observant, while Ikenna was quieter, showing little interest in his father's schemes. Udokanma, however, dismissed these differences. He believed that eventually they would all fall into line with plans. For now, he would continue to protect them, manipulate those around them, and prepare them to inherit the twisted legacy he had begun. One evening, an elderly widow named Nkem visited Udokanma. She was compelled to share what she had seen earlier that day. She had caught a glimpse of Nnanna sneaking through her neighbor's cornfield, plucking corns and stashing them into a sack. Knowing Udokanma's reputation, she assumed he would want to know, so he could discipline his son. Udokanma, I thought it was best to bring this to you before anyone else finds out. I saw Nana in Mama Ngozi's cornfield taking some ears of corn. I know he's a good boy and wouldn't want to tarnish your name, so I thought you would want to set him right, Nkem said. Udokanma felt a surge of anger boil within him. How dare this woman assume she would talk to him about his son's behavior? To him, her words were an insult, a suggestion that her own family was somehow better, that she had the right to judge his. But he hid his fury well, pretending to be grateful for her concern. Thank you, Nkem. It pains me to hear this, but I appreciate your concern. I will speak to my son, Nana, he said. Nkem left, satisfied that she had done her duty, but as Udokanma watched her walk away, he fumed. She thinks her children are above mine. I will show her, he said. He resolved to punish her for her audacity, to teach her that no one could cross him without consequence. Later that day, Udokanma journeyed through the forest for the home of a native doctor known only for dark rituals. The native doctor welcomed Udokanma and knew why he was there. Udokanma wasted no time, detailing the insults he felt at Nkem's words and described his desire to curse her family. He wanted Nkem's daughter, a girl known for her purity and honesty, to be cursed with a life of crime, to soil the family's good name and bring shame upon them. The native doctor, after listening to his concern, prepared a charm to bind Nkem's daughter to a fate of compulsive thievery that would torment the family. He gave the charm to Udokanma and instructed him to bury it outside Nkem's home at night when no one could see him. Udokanma did as he was instructed and left feeling triumphant. By morning, Nkem's daughter would begin her new life as a thief in her own community. It would be a tragedy that no one would be able to reverse. And as the villagers would lament her fall from grace, Udokanma would be the first to offer his sympathies, all while hiding the wicked truth behind his gentle mask. The next morning, Nkem's daughter Adora woke with a strange sensation. She felt compelled to wander through the village as if something was pulling her. Without understanding why, she found herself standing in front of a neighbor's house, staring at clothes hung out to dry. As if possessed, her hand reached out and before she knew it, she was stuffing a shirt into her bag. She was confused, but she couldn't stop herself. She took the clothes and hurried away. That afternoon, Adora's mother noticed the shirt and questioned her. But Adora could not remember why she had taken it or how it ended up in her possession. Her mother scolded her, but that changed nothing. Meanwhile, Udokanma had thoughts about the incident and was pleased to see his cause starting to take effect. He watched from afar as the villagers began to gossip about Adora's uncharacteristic behavior. Nkem was humiliated while Udokanma maintained his marks of sympathy, pretending to be supportive and offering advice to help cleanse Adora of the evil spirits that had taken hold of her. But inwardly he felt victorious. He knew he had struck a blow to the family that dared to question him. Over the following days, Adora's strange behavior only intensified. She began stealing small items, clothes, food, trinkets from neighbors' homes. The villagers were shocked and confused, as Adora had always been an honest, well-behaved girl. Her mother Nkem was devastated, unable to understand why her daughter had suddenly turned into a thief. As the gossip grew, Udokanma was never far away, always there to console Nkem and offer his words of wisdom. He suggested that perhaps Adora was under the influence of malevolent spirits and offered to help Nkem organize a cleansing ritual, one that would require expensive sacrifices. Nkem, who was desperate to help her daughter, even though it meant spending the little money she had saved. Udokanma enjoyed watching Nkem suffer. He was pleased that his plan was unfolding so perfectly. As the villagers judged Adora, his own reputation as a compassionate and helpful friend continued to strengthen. Adora's stealing soon escalated and the villagers grew increasingly angry. One day, she was caught taking a valuable beaded necklace from the royal home, a precious heirloom that had been in the family for generations. The villagers demanded an explanation, and when Nkem could not offer one, they turned on her, blaming her for not raising her daughter properly. Adora was brought before the village council, where she tearfully claimed she didn't know why she had stolen the necklace or any of the other items. She said it felt as if something took control of her, forcing her to act against her will. But the elders shook their heads in disbelief, declaring that she had brought shame upon her family and the kingdom. Udokanma was present at the council. He sorrowfully suggested that perhaps Adora needed guidance and forgiveness. The villagers murmured in agreement. Many of them thanked Udokanma for his wisdom, yet inside, Udokanma only felt satisfaction, knowing he had successfully destroyed Nkem's family without leaving a trace of his involvement. As time passed, a few villagers began to notice an unsettling pattern. Many who had experienced personal tragedies over the years, deaths, illnesses, failed marriages had all been comforted by Udokanma. It seemed that misfortune followed those closest to him, yet he always appeared to emerge unscathed, respected and even revered. One elderly woman named Norma began to speak quietly to others about her concerns. She remembered how her own son's sudden illness had led to his untimely death, with Udokanma at her side during every moment of their sorrow. At first, the villagers dismissed her claims, unwilling to believe that the man who had helped them through countless hardships could have a dark side. However, Norma's words lingered in the minds of a few. They began to observe Udokanma more closely, noting how his sympathy for others' suffering always seemed a little too perfect, as if he thrived on the village's misfortunes. One day, Udokanma's neighbor Obiechina arrived at his shop, brimming with excitement. He had news that his son Chidi, who lived in the city, had purchased a new car and was preparing to return to the village to begin a building project. Chidi had found success in the city and wanted to give back to his family by constructing a new home for them in the village. Obiechina was proud, boasting to Udokanma about his son's achievements. Udokanma feigned happiness, smiling and clapping Obiechina on the shoulder. They shared a drink with Udokanma, toasting to Chidi's success and safe return. But behind his pleasant expression was envy. Why must it be his son? Udokanma thought bitterly. Why not mine? Why should Chidi return to build a grand home while my sons struggle? As he poured another drink, his anger grew. He couldn't stand the thought of Obiechina's family rising above his. He told himself that Chidi's plan would never see the light of the day. That night, Udokanma went into his secret hut and rained a curse meant to stop Chidi from ever returning home. On the day of Chidi's journey, his car veered off the road and crashed in a tragic accident that took his life. News of his death reached the village and Obiechina was crushed. Udokanma was the first to arrive, wailing and cursing the fates. He joined the villagers in blaming unknown forces, casting suspicion upon anyone and everyone else. Inside, however, Udokanma felt triumphant. Another family's hope had been shattered, leaving him unchallenged once again in his own small world of power and deception. As Obiechina mourned his son, Chidi, the village was subdued by the loss. It was difficult for them to comprehend how a man who had just arrived success could lose his life so suddenly. Chidi's accident cast a shadow of grief over everyone, and once again, Udokanma was there to console them. He helped arrange the burial, spoke in sober tones, and even led the villagers in prayers for Chidi's soul. However, Nneoma, the woman who had begun to suspect Udokanma, felt an unusual way every time she saw him near Obiechina's family. Among Udokanma's targets was his elder brother Amadi, a hardworking man who worked in his farmland tirelessly. Amadi's efforts yielded bountiful harvests each year, particularly from his breadfruit trees, a prized cash crop in the village. Udokanma, envious as always, felt that Amadi's success strengthened his own standing, as the villagers often praised Amadi for his humility and hard work. Seeing his brother's prosperity, he decided that Amadi's good fortune must come to an end. Rather than work harder on his own farm, Udokanma let his jealousy consume him. He was frustrated by his brother's continued success, and so he visited the native doctor once more and paid him to cast a deadly spell on Amadi. Within days, Amadi fell gravely ill, and despite the efforts of the village healer, he passed away, leaving behind his only son, Okechukwu. After the burial, Udokanma immediately laid claim of Amadi's land. He insisted it was his right as the closest family member. He took over the breadfruit farm, but did nothing to care for Okechukwu. He left him to fend for himself. And as Udokanma told the villagers of his generosity in looking after his nephew, he subjected Okechukwu to a life of harsh labor, treating him as a servant. Unseen by the villagers, Okechukwu was often forced to work under grueling conditions. But if anyone inquired about his well-being, "That boy is unwilling to help himself," he would say to the villagers. Udokanma seemed a dutiful uncle to Okechukwu, but he was a tyrant. He continued to curse families whose successes strengthened his own, ensuring that their fortunes would always fall short, their children would suffer, and their dreams would remain unfulfilled. His son Nnanna, who continued stealing from farms and barns, was a constant worry for him. Yet, rather than discourage him, he shielded him from punishment and protected him from the consequences of his actions. The villagers had noticed Nnanna's behavior, but Udokanma always provided excuses or shifted the blame onto others. One day, a farmer whose name was Ikemefuna caught Nnanna in the act of stealing yams from his barn. Furious, he followed him to his father and demanded for justice. Udokanma, however, managed to deflect Ikemefuna's anger and then turned the situation against him. He accused him of spreading lies about his son and then used his influence to make others doubt Ikemefuna's account. Ikemefuna left, frustrated and humiliated, while Udokanma assured Nnanna that no one could touch him as long as he stayed close to him, the father. The more Udokanma protected Nnanna, the bolder his son became, convinced that he was untouchable. And as his behavior grew worse, the villagers' tolerance for Udokanma's family slowly began to fade. Meanwhile, the curse on Adora, Nkem's daughter, continued to haunt her. Her compulsion to steal grew stronger. It drove her to take anything she could get her hands on. Her mother's endless efforts to help her were futile, and Adora's name became tainted as the village labeled her a common thief. One day, Adora again stole the king's staff of authority. When the theft was discovered, the villagers were outraged. They said she had gone too far, laying hands on the king's staff that forbids the touch of a woman. She was seized by the guards and brought before the king. Under the village street laws, thief of a royal possession carried the death penalty, and she had been given a second chance after the last time. Her mother Nkem pleaded for mercy. She offered to repay the value of getting another staff, but the royal family was firm, insisting on the full punishment. The villagers gathered to watch, some with pity, others with judgment, as Adora's fate was sealed. From a distance, Udokanma watched the scene unfold, savoring the destruction of Nkem's family. With Adora sentenced to death by stoning, he felt triumphant. Adora's spirit did not rest. That very night after her death, strange events began to unfold around Udokanma's household. Objects began to move on their own. Strange shadows seemed to lurk in the corners of his home. At first, Udokanma ignored these occurrences. He believed his mind was playing tricks on him, but one night he woke up to the sensation of hands grasping at his throat. Gasping for breath, he looked around and found no one there, but felt the lingering pressure of invisible fingers around his neck. As the days went by, these disturbances became more frequent. Udokanma began to hear voices in the dead of night. Voices accusing him, calling him a murderer and fraud. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing, but deep down he knew it was Adora's spirit, seeking vengeance for the curse he had placed on her. Terrified, Udokanma sought the help of the native doctor. He hoped to rid himself of the spirit haunting him, but the native doctor warned him that Adora's spirit was bound by her unjust death, and the only way to stop her would be to confess his sins and seek forgiveness. Udokanma scoffed and dismissed the warning, but as he left the native doctor's hut, he felt Adora's spirit was not finished with him yet. As days passed, the haunting of Udokanma intensified. Every night, he was plagued by restless dreams and disturbing visions of Adora, eyes wide with anger and betrayal. Sometimes he would hear her voice in the wind, accusing him of causing her downfall. Other times it was the sound of chains rattling, reminding him of the fate she suffered because of his wickedness. Udokanma tried to ignore these hauntings, but his patience and sanity were wearing thin. He began waking up screaming, drenched in sweat, while his family grew increasingly concerned. His wife Amaka noticed his strange behavior and asked if he was ill, but Udokanma never shared his problem with her. As the haunting continued, he could no longer hide his terror. He sought the native doctor again, but this time the doctor warned him that the spirits were growing more powerful and would not rest until justice was served. Ignoring the native doctor's advice, Udokanma paid him even more to perform rituals to silence the spirits. But every ritual seemed only to strengthen Adora's presence, as if she were fueled by the refusal to confess. As he grappled with his haunting, disaster struck his breadfruit farm, which he had seized from his late brother Amadi. A strange bleat had overtaken the crops, with the leaves turning black and shriveled, and the fruits rotting before they ripened. He tried to revive the plants, but no matter how much he tried, they only worsened, and his farm, which once stood as a symbol of his wealth, became a decaying ruin. Udokanma, in his rage, took out his frustration on Okechukwu. He blamed the boy for bringing bad luck to the farm. His son Nnanna, emboldened by his father's protection, had continued his thieving ways. But as the villagers grew more distrustful of Udokanma, they became less willing to overlook Nnanna's crimes. Eventually, his thieves escalated, and one night he was caught red-handed, stealing goats from a respected elder's barn. This time, the villagers didn't seek Udokanma's intervention. They dragged him to the village square and demanded justice. Udokanma, upon hearing the news, rushed to the scene, attempting to talk his way out of it, as he had always done, but the villagers were tired of his excuses and they no longer respected his word. They demanded for the son Nnanna to be punished, just like anyone else who had broken the law. Udokanma begged for mercy. He claimed that Nnanna had merely been misled and that he would make amends, but the villagers were adamant. With no choice, he had to watch as his son was publicly humiliated and sentenced to be burnt alive. Udokanma's pride was humiliated. His own son faced the worst punishment ever melted on anyone in their community. He found out that he could no longer shield his family from the consequences of their actions, as he had lost the respect he had carefully cultivated over the years. After Nnanna's public punishment, Udokanma thought he had hit rock bottom, but one night his torment escalated. He woke to find not only Adora's spirit, but the spirits of his late brother Amadi and the other sons and daughters of the village whom he had killed, standing at the foot of his bed. Udokanma felt frozen as his brother's spirit pointed a finger at him. You stole from me your own blood. You took what was mine and subjected my only child to hard labor. And for what? For material gains. But now you will lose everything. The spirits tormented him not only with visions, but with physical touches and relentless talks. Udokanma realized he could not escape the consequences of his actions, yet he stubbornly refused to admit his crimes. Rumors of Udokanma's haunting spread throughout the village, and the elders decided to confront him. They summoned him and demanded an explanation. He attempted to deny the accusation, claiming the villagers had turned against him. As he walked back to his home, he could hear the spirits demanding justice. He woke up every night, feeling a suffocating pressure on his chest. The spirits spoke words of condemnation as they surrounded his bed. All they wanted was to squeeze out the last piece in him. Udokanma's evil once again reared its head. A young man named Ozemena had returned from the city to the village to marry his childhood sweetheart. The village celebrated the joyous occasion, but Udokanma was not happy with Echezona, whose daughter was about to be married into a wealthy home. On the day of the traditional marriage ceremony, he cast a spell that would break the marriage and bring misfortune upon the young couple. Shortly after the wedding, Ozemena's fortunes turned. His business deals failed and arguments began to divide him and his new wife, Okwamma. Rumors spread that the couple was cursed, though no one knew what had brought this darkness upon them. Yet Udokanma's satisfaction was short-lived. The spirits now doubled their attacks on him, enraged by his newest act of cruelty. Each night, he saw those he had cursed, demanding that he confess his sins. It was as if the very evil he unleashed upon others was returning to consume him whole. Udokanma's reckoning came when young Okechukwu fell ill. The villagers believed it was his doing. The elders, with the support of the king, summoned Udokanma to answer for his actions once and for all. He tried to deny their accusations, but suddenly felt an overwhelming pressure pulling him down. It was as if the spirits themselves were holding him captive. He admitted to cursing the villagers, to cursing the innocent girl Adora, killing and stealing his brother's land, causing the death of Chidi, and to every other dark deed he had concealed. As he confessed, gasps of horror rippled through the crowd. Udokanma had not only betrayed his family and friends, but had betrayed the very bond of the village itself. He begged for mercy, but the villagers had no mercy to give. They were filled with anger. They wanted him to face the full extent of his punishment. After Udokanma's shocking confession, the village elders gathered with a heavy heart to discuss his punishment, and a consensus was soon reached. Udokanma could no longer be allowed to live among them. The king announced their decision to the villagers, declaring that Udokanma would be banished from the village forever. To ensure he could not harm anyone again, they decreed that he would be cursed and forbidden from entering the village or interacting with any of its people. The villagers supported the decision, relieved that justice was finally being served. Some called for even harsher punishment, but the king told them it was best they remove him from their lives and allow the spirits to deal with him further. As Udokanma was taken away, he pleaded and begged, but no one listened. Okechukwu, his late brother's son, freed from his cruelty, began to excel. The villagers helped him cultivate the land his father had left behind. Ozemena and his wife, who had suffered from Udokanma's curse on their marriage, found peace as well. Okechukwu met and married Afoma, a beautiful, hard-working maiden in the village. Udokanma's family, though not banished alongside him, lived their lives walking in eggshells for a very long time before they eventually broke free from the judgments of his evil deeds.